Like all great sci-fi sagas, Halo's story begins a long time ago in a galaxy actually not far away at all. This galaxy right here, although it certainly wasn't the Milky Way as we know it. According to Halo lore, 100,000 years ago, mankind was roaming all across the galaxy and things were going pretty well until they ran into a parasitic species known as the Flood. While trying to escape those gooey fellas, they ran headfirst into an ancient civilization called the Forerunners. That led to a war which was decisively ended when the Forerunners blasted humanity back to the Stone Age, literally. After de-evolving the whole human race back into grunting cavemen, the Forerunners still had the Flood to deal with, so they created a race of artificial warriors called the Prometheans and built a bunch of giant super weapons known as the Halo Rings. Kind of a belt and braces approach. But somehow, they still end up fighting a losing battle. As a final Hail Mary, the Forerunners created a facility called the Lesser Ark to store DNA from the Milky Way's sentient species, and then used the Halos to wipe out all existing life in the galaxy. With a nice new squeaky clean galaxy to work with, they transported clones of each species back to suitable planets to begin again, seeding humanity 2.0 on a little blue orb called Earth. Fast forward a sprightly 2,500 years, and that's where Halo's story really begins, with the Forerunners civilization now in ruins and humanity once again traveling the stars.
In spite of their incredible technological achievements, mankind actually isn't doing all that well in 2552. As the Civil War rages between the colonies and the core worlds, the United Nations Space Command launches a super soldier program that involves kidnapping children, replacing them with clones, and then performing all sorts of crazy experiments on them to create the towering Spartans that we know and love today. So that's where baby Master Chiefs come from. Humanity's elite breed of 8-foot killing machines arrive just in time as their internal squabbles are interrupted when they come under attack from a massive multi-species army known as the Covenant. Which is one heck of a way to discover, or rediscover, that you're not alone in the universe. It turns out the Covenant worship the Forerunners as gods and treat their leftover technology as sacred artifacts. So when they discover that a bunch of Forerunner tech can be found on human worlds, they launch a massive invasion, wreaking havoc all across the Milky Way. While obviously not the first game in the Halo series in terms of release date, 2009's Halo Wars dipped back to cover this part of the story in more detail. It told the story of a plucky human ship called the Spirit of Fire on a mission to stop the Covenant from setting off a Forerunner superweapon, giving mankind the chance to fight another day. In the process though, its crew are left floating through space in cryosleep, hoping to drift back into contact with the rest of mankind somewhere down the line. So keep these frozen fellas in mind, they'll come back into the picture eventually.
The next part of the story is then told in 2010's Halo Reach, with the Human vs. Covenant war now in full swing. In an attempt to stem the tide of the Covenant's invasion, the UNSC has started developing the Spartan 3s, a slightly smaller, cheaper kind of super soldier designed specifically with expandability in mind. A group of these feisty little troopers called Noble Team are sent down to the planet Reach to recover data from a Forerunner vessel called Bat Kata, which could hold the key to winning the war. While they don't succeed, in fact, they basically all end up getting brutally murdered by the Covenant. Sorry guys. They do manage to secure the artifact and rescue an artificial intelligence named Cortana. Yes, like the one on your PC, who then uses it to send them hurtling towards a Halo ring. And with that, we've made it to the point where the first ever Halo game actually begins.
As they prepare to crash land onto the newfound Halo ring with the Covenant hot on their tails, the UNSC decide to entrust Cortana to a soldier named John 117, or Master Chief, the legendary veteran of over 200 campaigns against the Covenant and one of the greatest warriors in Spartan history. Exploring the Halo ring together, Chief and Cortana discover that the Flood are back and have infested the entire thing, leaving them with no choice but to blow up the entire thing if they don't want those creepy parasitic goo balls to spread across the entire galaxy. As the Halo ring goes up in smoke, Master Chief and Cortana drift off into space in a lone fighter ship, knowing full well that this is only the beginning.
The second Halo game begins with Master Chief being thrown a big old medal ceremony to reward him for all his hard work, only for the Covenant to come bursting out of a wormhole and start laying siege to the Earth. The The Spartans manage to force them back, with Master Chief's crew chasing them all the way to a whole other, entirely unexploded Halo ring, which the Covenant are quite keen on activating. Using the sort of nuanced thinking and strategic genius that we've always admired in him, Master Chief solves this problem by fighting his way to the big bad guy in charge, an old dude called the Prophet of Regret, and punching him to death. He's all ready to celebrate when another Covenant ship appears and blasts him into a flood-filled death pit. However, that was only half of the narrative that we got to play through in Halo 2. The hero of the other half was a disgraced member of the Covenant known as the Arbiter, who eventually finds himself captured by the very same tentacled Flood monster as the Chief. Rather than killing him, the Flood proposes that it, MC, and the Arbiter forge a truce so that they can all go after the Covenant together. With his new best frenemies in tow, MC is once again able to stop the Halo ring before it activates, but not before it initiates a standby mode that allows all the other Halo rings in the galaxy to be operated remotely from a ship called the Lesser Ark. Remember that one? We mentioned it way back at the beginning? And it just so happens that the Forerunners placed a portal to that very ship on Earth. Why'd they trust us with it?
So Halo 3 then kicks off with Master Chief, the Arbiter, and some friends slugging it out with the Covenant down on Earth before they all go tumbling through the aforementioned portal, with a bunch of ships infested by the Flood following right behind them. MC and the Arbiter are able to convince the Flood to work with them once again, since allowing the Covenant to ring in the apocalypse would work out pretty badly for all of them. And together they fight their way towards another big bad called the Prophet of Truth. This time, the Arbiter gets to do the honors, choking him out by his scrawny little neck. With the Halo relay deactivated and the galaxy saved, the Flood figure this would be a great time to serve up a portion of hot, spicy betrayal, and immediately attack both Master Chief and the Arbiter. In response, our dynamic duo hatch a plan to take out the Flood, just as the Forerunners did, by zapping them with the Halo ring, whilst far enough away from the rest of the galaxy to avoid killing everyone else. The plan works a charm, but an itchy trigger finger also leads to the Halo ring blowing itself apart, leaving our heroes scattered in its wake, with the Arbiter making it back to Earth, while Master Chief and Cortana are left floating out in an unknown part of space. It's hard work saving the world 3 times over, so our man in green decides to power down for a quick cryo sleep nap and wait for somebody to come pick him up.
Sadly, the wake-up call he gets 4 years later isn't quite the one that Master Chief was hoping for, arriving in the form of a Covenant attack that sends him barreling down to an enemy world called Requiem at the start of Halo 4. As he tries to make his way off the planet, he finds that Cortana is beginning to sound a little loopy thanks to a condition called rampancy, which causes AIs to gradually decay once they reach the end of their intended lifespan. In the process of trying to make it back to Earth so that he can patch up his malfunctioning buddy, Master Chief accidentally unleashes an ancient Forerunner known as the Didact. He's big, ugly, and really not a fan of humankind, so this turns out to be a pretty major error. His wife, on the other hand, is a charming lady named the Librarian. She tells Master Chief all about humanity's true history and offers her assistance to help thwart the Didact's plan to convert all of the humans in the galaxy into his own Promethean warriors, allowing the Forerunners to resume control. Basically, the usual galactic domination trip. Master Chief then heads off to track down the Didact, though not before causing a bit of an outrage back home by refusing to hand Cortana over to the UNSC, going rogue and taking his increasingly unstable AI buddy along with him instead. The Didact manages to wipe out an entire Earth city called New Phoenix before he can be stopped, but Master Chief is eventually able to take him down, with Cortana sacrificing herself so that he can make it out alive.
The 5th game then speeds us on to the year 2558, where humanity is now enduring an onslaught from both Covenant and the Didact's remaining Promethean forces. And we thought 2021 was rough. Halo 5 Guardians introduces us to a new Spartan squad called Fireteam Osiris, as they embarked on a mission to retrieve a missing scientist called Dr. Halsey, as well as being wanted for crimes against humanity as the originator of the whole child-stealing super soldier project. Dr. Halsey has some valuable intel which the UNSC are keen to recover. After getting hold of the good doctor, Fireteam Osiris are then sent off in search of none other than Master Chief. Halo's iconic hero appears to have broken bad after receiving a cryptic message from Cortana and going off in search of her. As it turns out, Cortana has uncovered an even more frightening set of Forerunner weapons called the Guardians, which are basically giant robot monsters. Cortana's plan is to take control of the Guardians herself so that her big, artificially intelligent mind can use them to keep humanity safe. It's all very Skynet, and Fireteam Osiris are having none of it, enlisting MC's old pal Arbiter to help them put a stop to the whole thing. They eventually manage to get MC himself on side, but even he can't talk Cortana out of her grand scheme, as she quickly enlists every other AI in the galaxy to back her up. With no moves left to make, the Chief and all his buddies pile onto a ship and frantically speed away from their new AI overlord. Oh yeah, and the name of that ship that they make their escape on? The Infinity.
But there is one more chapter to this tale that you might want to freshen up on before digging into Halo Infinite, and that is found in Halo Wars 2. The real-time strategy sequel picks back up with the Spirit of Fire crew after they spent a good 28 years drifting around in cryosleep. See, we told you they'd come up again. The Spirit of Fire folks eventually wake up to discover that they've bumped up against the Lesser Ark, which has now been taken over by a particularly nasty Covenant faction called the Banished. The good news is that the Ark is currently building a brand new Halo, which will be teleported back to known space upon completion, providing them with the perfect chance to hitch a ride back home. The bad news is that a Guardian snatches the Halo ring right out of the air while it's only halfway there, leaving the Spirit of Fire's crew in the clutches of a giant robot piloted by a reasonably unstable computer lady. So, that's where we find ourselves at the beginning of Halo Infinite.
And with that, you're ready to hop back into the battle and guide Master Chief on his quest to track down Cortana and protect humanity from her legion of death machines. And also from the Banished. And probably from a bunch more people too, if we're being really honest. But hey, he hasn't failed us yet, right? Hope this helped refresh your memory, although we're obviously leaving out a lot. So feel free to fire any helpful reminders down in the comments, or jump into the Master Chief Collection on Game Pass for a more hands-on history lesson. Feel free to subscribe and ring that bell on your way out, and thanks for watching. Bye!